So today we're here with
Scott Mosher.
Scott. Where did you go to high school and what year did you graduate?
Went to Effingham High School. I graduated in 1979.
What sports did you play in high school?
Football, basketball, and track.
Talk about your high school sports career from freshman to senior year.
Freshman year, I did all four sports, or all three sports, all 4 years. In track, I was sprinter and jumper, long jump, triple jump. Basketball, guard, weak side forward, and then football was quarterback and place kicker.
Talk about your teammates and your coaches.
Football, freshman year, Coach Maxon was our head coach. I was trying to think of this the other day. I cannot remember the JV coach at the time. Coach Klosterman was the varsity coach, had been there. He was, everybody knows Coach Klosterman, so he was the icon in football. And basketball was Jim Maxon was the varsity coach throughout that reign. And track, Phil Castelli was the head coach. Then my senior year was Tom Fish. That was a senior coach. So
talk about some of your teammates that you were with.
There were so many, being three sports. I don't want to miss somebody. So there are a lot of memorable guys. We had some great times, great moments together in all the sports. Had some pretty good success in basketball. We made it to the Sweet 16 my senior year, which that started that 3-year run because the next year Uwe Blob came and that bunch went to state and finished second in the state. And Blob's senior year, then they made it to the Elite Eight.
Yeah.
So they had a pretty good 3-year run there.
Talk about some of the teams and players that you played against in high school.
I don't recall any like Division I athletes or anybody like that. There was a multi-sport standout from Pana, Marty Stupek, that was fantastic athlete. He was their quarterback, punter, and I was the punt returner in high school. And when he would send one flying, I mean, it was like a college punter, a lot of hang time, a lot of distance. So usually in high school, the punts kind of roll around a little bit, and most of the time they're not even fielded. But with Stupek, I mean, he'd just hang them up there and get the fair catch, So he went on to play at Milligan, pretty good player there. But he's probably one of the most memorable players I played against as an opponent.
What were some of your favorite gyms and fields to play on in high school?
Football fields, because other fields had grass and we didn't, about any place we went to. Because back in those days, Klosterman Field, it was a lot to be desired. I mean, it was our home field advantage, but the lighting was really, poor compared to what it became later on. Of course, the new field, but in between the 25 or 30-yard lines, it was dirt about midway through the season because they just didn't take care of the field at the time. So we went on the road somewhere and we saw green throughout the whole field. We felt pretty good about that because it's a little bit softer to land on it when you got tackled.
Add any other stories you'd like to add during your high school career?
Had a couple memorable games. Probably, I'd say the basketball had to be by far the regional that we hosted my senior year. Effingham hadn't hosted a regional in a long, long time, and Coach Maxon made a play to get it hosted at our gym. And we knew, matter of fact, the whole season was geared at playing the team that beat us in the previous year's regional, Olney. And Olney had all their starters coming back. They made it to the Sweet 16 my junior year, but they eliminated us down at the Newton Regional.
Wow.
And Darnell Jones was their star guy. They had a lot of good players. Darnell ended up playing at Southern, had a good career at Southern. But Coach Maxon, his goal that year was to set us up to beat Olney in the regional because we were also mad about the way that game had ended in the previous year. So we knew we'd have to go through them, to go on to postseason.
Yeah.
So we ended up hosting at the junior high gym now, which again was a home court advantage the way it was shaped. Only people were really mad because it was such a small gym and the place was packed. And the whole town got revved up for it. There were signs coming in from Olney to Effingham, this way to the Cracker Box Palace. That was, I don't know if you knew that story, one of our sports writers had deemed our gym a Cracker Box. So we had posters made up. The sound guy at the gym was playing the Beatles song Cracker Box Palace during the whole warm-up. So it was a pretty fun atmosphere that night. So,
did you receive any awards in high school?
Yeah, mainly in football. I got all conference my senior year, and I got some kind of I don't recall now. Chicago sometimes at that time, I don't know if they it's even around anymore, but they had all state, and I think I was special mention or honorable mention or something like that. It was pretty far down the line, but I felt that was kind of neat just to get into the conversation. So
after the high school career, where did you go to college?
Went to Southern Carbondale. I tried walking on football there as a place kicker. I thought about quarterback, but other quarterbacks, I mean, at the time, Southern was a Division I team before they split up into the 1A and 1AA. Back then, now it's FCS, FBS. But even the quarterbacks they had were, oh my gosh, they're like 6'5" and 230, 240. Here I am at 6'1" and 170. So I was well undersized even for a quarterback. And then, but I actually went there to be more of a place kicker. And even the kickers were quite a bit bigger and stronger than I was, and they had a lot more to their kicks and all that. So I saw the writing on the wall. I mean, I was decent for around this area, but when it stacked up against other competition, I knew I wasn't going to be able to hang out with those guys. So
since you were more of a walk-on, talk about your career, including some of the teammates and coaches that you got to be with, I guess.
My brief stint at Southern was during the Ray Dempsey era, and Ray actually led the Salukis to a 1AA championship at my senior year in 1983. So that was kind of fun to watch that team, because I knew a few of those guys, not real well, because again I wasn't there long, but to see all that come together, you knew probably about in 3 or 4 years we're going to have a really strong program there. So that was pretty nice. High school, Coach Maxiden. He was a disciplinarian and very stringent on what he wanted you to do. He could have fun with the players, but also when things weren't going right, he let you know it that you're in the doghouse.
Yeah. So kind of switching gears a little bit, you've been the voice of the football hearts for a long time now. Mm-hmm. How long have you been the voice?
I've done 28 seasons, so this fall will be my 29th year.
Wow, 29th year. How did you get started?
It started out back in the day in 1988. There was myself and some other guys formed the junior football league, and I was on the sidelines as an assistant coach with the junior football league for a few years, and then I decided to step away from the sidelines, and I didn't want to be away from the game, so nobody was doing any announcing for the JFL team, so I thought, why not? So as long as we had the high schools, they would up at the booth and let me use the system. I mean, there was really nothing to think about that, but I just had to kind of make it up myself, because, you didn't have a lot of other support and other people helping you. But it was kind of fun doing that. It wasn't very high pressure, but I thought that was kind of nice. Then Mike Hoskins, who was the high school coach a few years later, he came in for a 2-year stint before Mike McDonald took over in 92. But Mike Hoskins wanted me to do it after his first year was over. He approached me, wanted to know if I'd be the announcer for the high school games. Like, oh, sure, okay. So that was put in motion, and then of course he left after his second year. So he actually wanted me to do it, and then I didn't do it his second year. Then when he left, Coach McDonald took over. Coach McDonald contacted me about, he understood I was supposed to be the announcer. Like, okay. Really? So that's where it started in 92.
Who has helped you along the way?
I've had some guys help me. A lot of people don't know it. I guess you don't even think about it, but I have an on-the-field spotter. In the first years, I was trying to find whoever could do it on a given Friday night. Then Sid Kibler finally agreed to be my go-to guy. So Sid's been doing it not 28 years, but a good portion of those. So he helps spot tacklers and ball carriers, which you may seem like it isn't a hard thing to do from a distance, but because parents focus on their kid for the most part. But when you're trying to be, who's got the ball, who's making the tackle, in high school, the numerals aren't as big. You're not looking at a TV screen with the numerals this big in front of you, so you need to have help on the sideline. So Sid's been doing that. In the booth, Doug Thomas is my tech guy. So he does, he helps kind of back up Sid on the spotting, because he has binoculars, and we have the two-way radios, obviously, that we communicate. And Doug does the sounds for music and situational music and stuff like that. So he's been a big help all these years.
What do you enjoy most about the announcing?
I just enjoy doing it. It makes me. I feel like I'm part of the game, even though I'm not playing anymore. But just to be a part of team sports without actually participating, I'm not a coach or anything like that. But I'm more than just a fan. When I'm sitting here watching the game, I'm actually trying to bring that to them and keep them informed. So that gives me a good feeling to try to contribute something to the game.
You do an excellent job with that, by the way.
Well, thank you.
List your favorite games.
There's been a lot. I don't want to miss out on. We've had so many good athletes. The one that sticks out in my mind was at the old Colostrum Field. I want to say it was '92. Don't quote me on that because it was early. It was early in my broadcasting career. We played Mattoon at home, the first round game, and I can't remember the sequence of how it all happened, but they got up on us either 14 or 21 to nothing within the first few minutes of the game. I mean, our fans weren't even settled in the stands yet, and we were behind the 8 ball really quick. I thought, holy cow, we had a good team. And I thought, this is going to be a blowout. My goodness, what's going on? And then all of a sudden, we had a play. They were punting, and we blocked the punt, returned it for a TD. And that play just made them come unglued, Mattoon. And then all of a sudden, nothing went right for them the rest of the contest, and our kids kept feeding on that, and we ended up winning that contest. A little side note, if my memory serves me right, I think Administrator Jason Fox was on the Mattoon squad that year. So I think he told me a story about when I brought that game up years ago without even knowing he played for Mattoon. He says, yeah, I remember that game. I think he said he was a receiver, if I'm not mistaken. But it's funny how things kind of work out in the end. But favorite games, there's been a lot of them. We had a lot of good athletes over the time. Yeah. It seems like Effingham football anyway. We don't have a lot of Division I talent, or it's very rare that we get a kid that gets looked at by a major D1 school. But we have a lot of kids that play college ball. They go on other schools, and it just goes a lot to say we don't have necessarily standout athletes that are by far can compete at that level. But our coaches seem to get the best out of our kids. I can't remember in the 28 years there has never been a squad, and I can say this, that's never underachieved. I mean, they seem to. Each kid does his job, and we don't have the 6'8", 300-pound studs that you see on some of these state teams when you watch the playoff finals in November from other schools, and you hear the announcer say, there's 6 kids on this side of the ball going to D1 schools and 7 kids on this side. We're lucky to get 1 kid a year, if even that, and we haven't had that. So it just goes to show that the discipline that our kids have. Basketball is the same way. We've had some outstanding teams that accomplished a lot. We've had some that individually they weren't necessarily standout athletes, but they played well as a team and had a lot of success that way. So it's kind of neat to watch that you're not banking your game on one person.
Absolutely.
Like some schools do.
So like you said, you don't really know too many standout athletes, but as far as name some memorable players that you know for sure.
Well, for our own team, I know you did a story with Mitch Arnold. Mitch was a year younger than me, so I played with him. He played a little bit his freshman year when I was a sophomore, and then as we progressed up, he was a junior my senior year, and then of course he had a good 3-year run with his junior and senior year, and the next year he went on to college ball and ended up having a good career at Fresno State and so forth. So Mitch was a good player to play with. Chris Brown, Chris was an unsung hero. He was just, what do they call that in football, the lunch pail guy. There wasn't a lot of finesse or anything about it, but he just wasn't afraid. He didn't back down. A lot of times, we were going up. He, was in the post, so he was going up against kids that had a lot more size on him, that never intimidated him. So I thought that was pretty good.
Who are some of the biggest role models in your announcing and life?
Life is easy. That's my parents. They both had good work ethic. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. That was back in traditional families. The dad worked outside the home, and mom stayed home and took care of the household stuff and things like that. But just the work ethic that they instilled in me. So as a life role model, it's them. Announcing wise, I've never tried to cop anybody. the high school level, we didn't have a high school basketball announcer until Sid Kibler started doing it. So for decades and decades, there was nothing there to emulate that. Baseball, you hear, of course, Jack Buck on the Cardinals, Jim Turpin did the U of I football and basketball for so many years, Brian Barnhart, U of I, Larry Wilson, locally on the radio station. You just kind of like take bits and pieces from what they did. Also, the announcer at Southern, I liked the guy that did the football PA there at McAndrew Stadium at the time. I don't even remember his name, but he had a good way to get the crowd going. He wasn't a cheerleader on the mic, and I don't try to be a cheerleader on the mic either. I try to present the game in I'm gonna say a fair and balanced way, but if the other team is doing some things good, I'm gonna give them credit for that. But if the kids made a bunch of tackles or quarterbacks just chewing us up, but you want to be fair to the other side too, and you don't want to be a cheerleader the whole night on the microphone for your home team. That's just my way of doing it. I know you go to other schools and it's different. They've got somebody that won't shut up on the mic, and is wanting to be rah-rah, but that's never been my style, and I don't want it to be.
If you had to describe a favorite moment, what would that be?
In announcing, I'm assuming.
Yes.
I don't know if I've got a really favorite one or not. There's been so many. We've had a good run of playoffs here in recent years, and I don't want to miss anybody or anything like that. But watching some individual players that, Terrence Hill, probably as a back. Was probably one of the best backs I'd ever seen at the high school level. Back in the day, I was too young to really appreciate it, but Bob Duvall, I hear a lot about the 1970s era teams and how the sports writer Sam Rickelman used to write about him. Larry Wilson talked about him, but he was such a pure runner. He did play D1 ball for a bit, but I didn't have any, in my growing up, I didn't recall just somebody that just had the skills that he did, the way he would just read the defense after he got the ball. Because a lot of tailbacks, the coach says, here's the play, I go this way, and that's it. But he had that ability to make those lateral adjustments each time he grabbed the ball. And it was just a pleasure to watch that kid. I mean, he just had that sense about
Terrence is a
football.
good athlete. He was a heck of an athlete.
And he's got a good career up at Naperville.
Absolutely. He's doing really well up there. Yeah. Since you started, how has the game changed?
Football-wise, offense, much more offense than what we ever saw before. Back in the, again, I'm from old school, it was 3 yards in a cloud of dust. If a quarterback threw 10, 12 times a game, that was a lot for Coach Klosterman. And other teams didn't throw that much either. It's just the way that game was played back then. So if you put up, 30 or 40 points, that was a big night, because you had to have a lot of breakaway runs for that for the most part. Nowadays, especially at Effingham's history in the last couple years, we've had running clocks for virtually all of our home games the last 2 seasons. So you kind of get spoiled on that, okay, how soon is it going to be before we run that clock? It's kind of a joke in the booth, at what point, over and under, when are we going to have a 40-point spread here? But that's what's changed a lot. Of course, the facilities. Schools have more money now to put in facilities. Every place we played back in those days, the facilities were already decades, 30, 40 years old. There wasn't anything fancy about it. Just the technology has changed the game. Basketball-wise, I would say what's changed the game there is the amount of the physical play that they allow players to get away with. Back in our day, if you try to play then like you do now, you'd foul out the whole bench. I mean, they just allow so much physical contact now, and that's why in some of the scoring, you don't see as much scoring anymore like we used to. If you get into the 50s and 60s nowadays, that's considered a high-scoring game. But back when we played, 80s and 90s were the norm. Wow. So there was just a lot of offense, a lot of fast break, pressing up and down the court. You didn't hold on to the ball that long. It seems like, okay, we got to run a minute off the clock before anybody takes a shot now. No, it's first 1 or 2 guys touches the ball. If it's an open shot, you take it.
Yeah. So what advice would you give to a beginning announcer?
Don't try to copy somebody. Be your own person. Again, if you don't, try to have some frame of reference, maybe a TV announcer or radio announcer or somebody that you like, maybe their style or how they present things, and then adapt it to your own, to make it your own. Whether you have a catchphrase or or anything like that. You know, baseball announcers are famous for the home run call, however they do it, and that's their moniker. But you know, you don't necessarily need to have one of those to make a name for yourself. So,
what has announcing done to change your life?
It's kept me in contact with you know, the younger kids. You know, my kids are well grown and well past the high school age, so you lose touch of who's there. Matter of fact, these football kids, when they have helmets on, if I'd pass them in the street, I probably wouldn't know who they are. You know, I don't like that part about it, because I just don't get to see who they are unless they, you know, take their helmet off during the game or something on the sideline. But again, it's allowed me to be still a part of sports. We don't really play any sports anymore.
Add any other stories you'd like to add during your announcing days?
Only other story I can think of that was player related was fall of '77. Vandalia came to town. We were supposed to play against the older Klosterman Field. Just before we were to go out on warm-ups, a cold front was moving in and a bad storm was coming. So we were normally, the pregame ritual is you went, after you got dressed in the locker room, you went up in the gym, sat kind of ringed around the gym, waiting for the coaches to come up and talk to you. Well, then they didn't come up, and it was like, wow, we're running late here. And they finally came up and said, we're waiting for the storm to go through. It's kind of a nasty one. We'll see what it looks like after that. Well, lightning and thunder, I mean, it just came down in buckets, and then it hailed. And it was big hail, and it was a lot of it. And when it stopped, we walked out, and it looked like snow was covering the ground. I mean, there wasn't anything but white anywhere. And then with the temperature change, all of a sudden steam started rolling up from the field and created this fog.
Oh my.
You couldn't even see the field from the gymnasium. The fog was so thick. And of course the hail's still sitting there. So coaches got together and officials said, we're not going to play this game tonight. And then they wanted to do it the next day at a day game. Well, somebody was in a wedding or something, so they couldn't do that. So they said, why not Sunday? So we were told, hey, we're going to come back Sunday afternoon for a day game. Well, to my knowledge, that we hadn't had a day game at Klosterman Field ever. And that was only by default that we had to do that. So we showed up, that it was a lot colder that day, and the crowd was like a playoff atmosphere. I remember looking around the field, because people were ringing the field, which we'd never had that before. And you could see letter jackets from other schools that were there watching. I thought that was pretty cool, because, you know, what are you going to do on a Sunday afternoon? Of course, the NFL was on, but there was nothing to do, so everybody came out, and it was like a playoff atmosphere. So that was our first real taste of some game like that. So announcing-wise, I don't have any one specific game. Again, with the playoff runs we had under Coach McDonald and Coach Hefner now, it's just so great to see the community and the fans show up in droves like that and really get behind the teams. The crowds are so much bigger nowadays than what we had back in our day. And I love seeing that. I love seeing people being a part of IHSA sports in some regard, because whether you're a participant or a fan, it's just a fun atmosphere.
This last fall was a memorable year. Last fall was a very memorable year.
The furthest we ran in the playoffs, and the highest level playoff game I'd ever called. And of course, it was a heartbreaking conclusion, but it was, you know.
I was right there.
Yeah. But, you know, you talk about sometimes life lessons, you know, with sports. There's one right there. I mean, the kids are going to take that season away and remember all the good times they had. You know, unfortunately, that last game is going to be a bitter pill, that they're going to remember that for a long time. But, you know, that's one of those life lessons there, even with good effort, good participation, good attention, all that. Sometimes you don't get an outcome that you want. And losing in sports can teach you to handle a little bit of adversity, you know, when you face other things later in life. You know, if you have everything handed to you, the first bad thing comes along, you don't know how to react to it. But high school sports is a great way to teach. Sometimes the outcomes aren't pleasant or pleasurable, but you have to live with it. You know, every athlete's got a game or games that they knew they should have won it, didn't win it for whatever reason, but they understand that there's a reason for what happens, and you can't always just be on top all the time. You got to learn to take adversity. So I think those are those lessons that people take away from that. Obviously, everybody wants the state championship trophy and the conference trophy. And the neat part about it, though, with high school sports, especially when it's team sports, you get to enjoy those successes with other people. That can never be taken away. So when you go to high school class reunions 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now, guys will still be, I don't know about the ladies, but the guys still talk about, when they did this or did that at a game. And it's just those memories you can enjoy with each other. Individual athlete sports, that's a tougher road sometimes because there's nobody there that's going to make the success. It's either you or nobody, if you're a golfer, tennis player, whatever. And even when you have success, sometimes it's tough to enjoy that as much because you don't have other teammates to really share that with. You got coaches and your parents and trainers or whatever you can, that in the background help you out. But I always felt that the team sports, by far, can have more lasting memories for you.
It's huge, absolutely. Mm-hmm. At what age did you become interested in sports?
Oh, real young, probably age 6. Back in those days, there was no Corey League. They had Little League Baseball, but I think you had to be 12 to play Little League Baseball. So they had an organization that Gene Nickham, who was a longtime Country Financial rep, he started a Tomorrow Stars Little League under softball. So there was softball for kids under age 12. So that's what everybody played until they got to the baseball age, and they transitioned over to community park and played baseball. So I enjoyed playing those years of softball, and that's what really got started on just sports in general.
What advice would you give to anybody or youth about playing sports in general?
Have a backup. Understand that as a young player, a very, very, very small percentage goes on to college sports. A very smaller percentage than that goes on to pro sports. So the odds are you're not going to be a pro athlete, so you have to have a game plan. Have some fun, doing what you're doing. So I would advise, enjoy what you're doing. Don't do it because somebody else wants you to be doing it. You have to enjoy the sport, otherwise you're going to hate every minute of it, whatever it is. But if you're wanting to go on to each next level, have a backup plan if something doesn't work out for you, namely college. When my daughter got recruited for volleyball, one of the things we kept asking her, okay, if you weren't going to play volleyball at this school, would you still want to go to this school? And that was, a big part of her decision where she went at Edwardsville. But I would say, if you're being recruited for baseball, football, whatever your sport is, if something doesn't work out, injury, or you just plain lose interest or whatever happens, are you still going to want to stay at that school? So, are you going there for the right reasons?
What is your current occupation?
I'm a Country Financial rep here in Effingham, have been for 34 years.
What do you enjoy so much about that?
Each day is a little bit different than the next. You get to have a lot of contact with a lot of people. It's very service oriented, and also you have to sit down with folks and try to discover, what needs they have that they may not even know they have. And sometimes that has to come out in the conversations, where obviously insurance just protect you against the unexpected, and that can be anything: car accident, home claim, loss of life, loss of a breadwinner. How is your family set up to handle those financial pitfalls that you might be faced with? And that's what we try to coach them, to educate them about, what your responsibilities, what are your goals, how have you taken care of those right now to this point. If something bad were to happen, and if there's any gap or anything like that, is there something that we can show you or offer you that would close that gap to make you feel better? So,
in closing, is there anything else you would like to share?
No, I just being a part of the FEM community for so long. It's a very caring community, which when you have fundraisers or not focusing on team sports and high school stuff, and again, but the support that this community stands behind people for whatever the cause. Somebody's going through a bad illness and there's a fundraiser here or there. It just seems like, at some point, does all this money dry up or something like that? Because there's so many of those things out there, so many good causes to do stuff, and it seems like it always works out with the different efforts of the people that are so supportive of each other in this community. So it's good to be a part of a close-knit, if that's the right term, close-knit community, that people are ready to step up to the plate and help out somebody that's going through a tough time. So that gives me a good sense that I'm a part of that kind of a city and county.
Scott, you do a terrific job for the Voice of the Hearts. People have told me all the time about how good of a talker you are, just getting everybody hyped up for the game. So I appreciate your time. Thank you for talking with me, and I'm happy to talk with you soon. Okay.
Well, thanks. It was a pleasure doing this.